Story 1. I, 15, female, have had a long and elaborate history with injuries, especially breaking my arm. Starting from literally the day I was born, my health has been complicated. I have a few conditions, but none serious enough to impact my daily life as I know it. I have a very weak immune system and somewhat easy to break bones. On top of that, I am the definition of clumsy, and I'm also a huge idiot who gets herself into dangerous situations for fun. My mom, 40, female, has obviously known me from birth and knows just the extent of my weird bad luck and health issues. I've broken my arms a collective 13 times over my entire life, and almost every time I got injured or sick, it seems somebody had something to say about it. I don't know why, but teachers just love to say that students that get hurt often are attention-seeking fakers, and a lot of relationships with authority figures have been harmful because of this. Every time it's the same. For some reason a teacher doesn't believe me, they call me a liar in front of everyone. I get bullied for a while, and then I have to try and prove that I'm not faking. I could post so many stories about teachers doing this, but this is a story about the time my mom actually managed to get revenge. This all took place around 7th grade. I was 12 at the time, and I had broken my wrist by climbing on top of something I wasn't supposed to, and then falling off like an idiot. My wrist was in a Velcro cast since I'm very allergic to the regular cast material, as they figured out through many cases of trial and error. My teacher, let's call her Mrs. Tablet since this took place while we were learning about Egyptian tablets. She taught history and our personalities clashed a bit. I'm more of a creative, adventurous, free thinker type, and she was very conservative, by the book, and proper. We hadn't had any real issues before this, but we just didn't mesh well. She was absent one day, and we had a sub in. I knew the sub as one of my teacher's friends and one of my bully's mom. I didn't like her, but I was still respectful in class and just tried to get my work done. She got me in trouble for doodling on my paper once or twice, but other than that everything was fine, or so I thought. The next day I went into class like usual. We were working on an assignment about Egypt and their tables when Mrs. Tablet called me over to her desk. I went over, thinking she'd just get on to me for drawing on the back of my homework or something, only to get bombarded with a bunch of really weird questions. The interaction went something like, "So, Fire, do you know why I've called you up here? I know Fire isn't my Reddit name, but it's my real-life nickname, so I'm using it here." "No ma'am, I can't say that I do." "How long have you had that cast?" "About a week now." "Why? Do you really need that cast?" Yes." "Well, the substitute told me she saw you take it off." "It's a cast. I can't take it off. It would hurt." "So if I asked the class, they'd say you need that cast?" "Yes." "And if I called your parents right now, they'd say the same thing?" "Yes, they were the ones to take me to the hospital." And she did this in front of the whole class. I was eventually dismissed, and people looked at me weird for the rest of class. As I later learned, apparently the substitute had told Mrs. Tablet that I'd taken off my cast as soon as I left class. I didn't, and that I threw it in my locker like, "Ha ha, I'm getting away with doing less work." So basically she pretended I was a bad guy in a crappy high school movie. I don't know why she said this, but it had my teacher convinced that I was a liar and a fake. I technically could remove my cast since it was Velcro, but that would have been extremely painful, and it's not like I could just walk around without it. I wasn't going to make a big deal about it at the time, but it turns out she was serious about calling my parents. But she made the mistake of calling my mom. Now me and my mother don't have a perfect relationship. She has anger issues, so we don't always get along well, but she loves me very much and doesn't let people like this mess with me if she can stop it. According to my mom, Mrs. Tablet called her all cocky and said things like, "Apparently your daughter is wearing a cast. Did you know that?" And, well, we all know how dramatic teenage girls can be, especially unique kids like her. She apparently even threatened to have me suspended before my mom stopped her and tore her to shreds for talking about her child like that. I don't think I'm allowed to repeat what was said, but by the end, Mrs. Tablet had to retreat with her tail tucked between her legs. She started being even more cold to me after that day and started giving me unfair detentions for not sitting still and doodling on the side of my worksheets. Even then, outside of school, we went to the same art studio sometimes. Weird that someone who hates art so much likes to paint and poisoned the art director against me and got me put into a lower class. When my mom found out about this, she started the real revenge. My mom has never been a TOD, Parent-Teacher Association mom. She honestly can't stand most of the TA members, and their kids are chosen as favorites at my school and use this power to bully others, including me and my friends. My mom is, however, friends with a very lovely woman on the county school board, which has more power than the TA. She told her friend everything that had happened and supplied all the doctor's notes needed to prove I needed my cast. Her friend managed to convince the rest of the board that Mrs. Tablet was discriminating against an impaired student, given her comments about me being slower at work and just wearing the cast to slack off, along with detentions related to me not sitting still when she knew I had nervous movements and slight ADHD. At the art studio, my mother pulled me from the classes. I took it upon myself to inform the fellow kids about why, and rumors spread quickly. Soon enough kids were getting pulled left and right, and my art teacher was pulling at strings to try and get the situation under control. I actually think the studio went into temporary close before reopening again. She was suspended for a week to go under investigation, and it turns out she treated a lot of the unique, as she put it, students in a similar way. She was verbally reprimanded by 2 different departments, and instead of getting her standard raise over the next 3 years, she'll only get half of that. Not only that, but she had to retake a course on how to properly treat students. And if she's ever caught crossing this line again, she'll lose tenure. She'll just be getting her bonus back at the start of next school year, and I'd just like to say that I hope she learned her lesson. Story 2. This is a story about my cousin. He used to work as a parking officer a few years ago. The following story happened to him, and his response seemed befitting to this subreddit. One day my cousin was off shift, and in his civilian clothing, he was simply shopping for groceries at the supermarket that evening. Once he left the supermarket, he went back to his car and loaded the trunk with his groceries. He proceeded to put the key in the ignition and start the car. Before he was able to exit his parking space, he got blocked by another car meaning to stop him from leaving his parking spot. Then comes out a guy who was trying to confront my cousin, knocked on his window and ordered him to step out of the vehicle, while flashing a badge. Turns out he is an undercover cop in civilian clothes, driving in an unmarked vehicle. My cousin complied and stepped out. Jerk, seems that you have quite a beast of a ride there, my friend. Cousin, it's only a family SUV, officer. Jerk, I'm not quite sure about that. I heard some unusual sounds from your engine as you pull over. I suspected you might have installed some illegal performance modifications on your vehicle. Cousin, I assure you, I haven't. My car is in perfect stock condition. Jerk, well, I had to make sure. So I waited for you until you got back and turned the ignition again. And I do believe there might be a few modifications to your car now that I heard it again. Cousin, I'm pretty confident that I did not install any modifications on my car. Feel free to check under the hood. My cousin pops the hood open. Jerk, well, what do we have here? You modified your air intake system. Cousin, that's a stock intake. What makes you even think that this is a modified one? And now my cousin is starting to get pissed at him and questioning his competence at what he is claiming to know. Cousin, look dude, I'm not sure you even know what you are talking about here. Jerk, oh I know. I knew it since I heard of your unusual engine. I know you're packing. Cousin, why would anyone even modify a family SUV like it was a street race car? Jerk, I don't know, you tell me. Anyway, I'm issuing you a ticket for this. Cousin, you are issuing me a ticket for something you clearly are not experienced in? Look, buddy, you are trying to plant fictional modifications in my car, and I have the hood wide open for you. So please drop the act, or call in another officer who has more experience than you in these matters. Jerk, I don't think that's necessary. I'm pretty confident your air intake is modified, and I am experienced enough in these matters. The jerk officer now proceeds to head back to his car to grab out the ticket book. This is where the sweet revenge starts. Cousin is furious and decides to retaliate. Cousin heads back to his car as well to grab his own ticket book. When they were facing each other again, the jerk was surprised to see a ticket book in Cousin's hands. Jerk, what is happening here? Cousin, I'm writing you a ticket too. Jerk, wait, you're an officer too? And what are you writing me for? Cousin, yes, I'm a parking officer. I'm writing a ticket for illegal parking in a driveway and obstructing a parking space and the exit of other vehicles. Jerk, I'm not doing that. I'm right here by my car and I'm available to move it out of the way. I'm only obstructing your exit to carry out my duty until I issue a violation. Cousin, you're not allowed to do that unless you are in a government vehicle. Jerk, this is a government vehicle. Cousin, it's not. It's a civilian car with a public license plate. Sorry, the government vehicle exemption doesn't apply to you in this case. The fine is coming out of your pockets, buddy. Jerk, I'm just going to appeal to court about this then. The government will just waive your ticket. Cousin, you try to do that, buddy. If it works, you are welcome to come back to me and spit in my face. Cousin, here is what's going to happen. You take your ticket to court. You plead not guilty on account that I can't find government vehicle. The rules for undercover cops is that if they are in unmarked vehicles, they are fully responsible for any accidents or violations as long as you have your sirens hidden and dispatch haven't sent you, which is true in my country. The car is currently treated as a civilian car since those conditions don't apply. Therefore, you are responsible for this violation. As for my ticket, I'm going to appeal to court as well. The court will assign another experienced officer to inspect my car. Since I'm confident that I didn't modify my car in any way, and you're full of crap, I'm getting this ticket waived. This will also possibly get reported and posted in your file at your police station for falsifying violations. My guess is that you are just trying to fill a ticket quota for a promotion or something. I don't know. I don't care. All I know is, you screwed with the wrong guy. The jerk officer's face was reddening with anger, and my cousin shoved his ticket in his hand and tried to grab the one out of his. Jerk was reluctant in handing out the ticket, seeing that the outcome was going to backfire at him, so my cousin yanked it out of his hand and went inside his vehicle. Cousin rolls down the window and says, "If you will excuse me now, I need you to move your vehicle. I have a wife and a baby son waiting to be fed." Jerk was mumbling as he walked to his vehicle, while my cousin left smiling. Story 3. So some backstory. I was an employee at a little, yet popular cafe which we'll call Cafe X in my rapidly developing town. Unfortunately, I got laid off due to the pandemic. Understandable though, it was tiny. I get along well with customers, some of which I know on a first-name basis. The incident occurred at another cafe, Cafe Y, where two of my friends work. One of them, Mitsu, is a barista, while the other, Kiran, was the manager. Cafe Y is way more popular than my cafe, so more people went there to get their coffee. I had had a couple screw-ups while I was working that day and was really beating myself up. My manager, who was worried about me, told me to clock out early today and to relax. We all have days like this. Just come back tomorrow with a smile. Honestly, I was annoyed that she didn't trust me to control myself, but she probably did the right thing. Anyways, on to the story now. I was tired and stressed out after being sent home, so I decided to go to Cafe Y in order to grab something and head home. However, I had forgotten Kiran and Mitsu were working that day, which was a pleasant surprise. It was the slow period of the day, and the two were talking together. The moment I walked in, Mitsu joked about how rats in the store are a safety violation. She calls me rat. It's a long story. I flipped her off a show of affection and asked Kiran for some tea, which he laughed and said sure. Mitsu and I sat down and talked, while Kiran boiled the water for my favorite blend, green tea /mint. A lady walks in and Mitsu gets up to go take her order. As I'm waiting, I noticed that the sugar at the sugar cream section was low. Wanting to help out my friends, I take the sugar out from the cabinet below, refill it, walk back to my seat, and start playing games on my phone. My first mistake. Obviously, the lady saw me and started ranting. The conversation went a little something like this. T is me. Karen, asterisk scoffs asterisk. Wow, how professional of your co-worker there. Taking out his phone in the middle of his shift. People like him don't deserve to work. Mitsu looks around, confused. Mitsu. Ma'am, I'm the only one here. Can I get you anything else? Karen gives her a look like she's completely stupid. Karen, are you making fun of me? I can clearly see your co-worker not working. She points at me. I haven't looked up, but I've been paying attention to the conversation. I speak up. T. Ma'am, I don't work here. My second mistake. Karen turns to me and walks over to my table. Karen, shut your mouth, you filthy liar. I saw you restock the sugar, and you shouldn't lie to your customers like that. Funny thing about me, when I'm tired and off the clock, I don't take crap from anyone. My general response is either sarcastic or condescendingly witty. Bad habit, I know. I look up at her, locking eyes. T. Lady, I want you to take a look at the logo on her shirt and tell me if it matches up with the logo on my shirt. She blinks for a minute, looking at my shirt. Then she snaps at me. Karen, don't you talk to me like that, you delinquent. You work here. Now I demand you get behind the counter and help make my order. I put my phone in my pocket, letting out a sigh. T. I don't work here. I'm not allowed to go behind the counter. I look at Mitsu, who nods in confirmation. Mitsu. Ma'am, he doesn't work here. She wheels around, pointing directly in M's face. Karen, don't you cover up for him, you little witch. I saw you talking just a second ago. You're just trying to bail your friend out. Her first mistake. I immediately get up and walk up to her. T. Lady, I think you need to apologize to my friend. I'm very protective of my friends, especially people like Mitsu. She can't stand confrontation like this and often would get anxiety from this kind of situation. Karen wheels around to me, now shoving her finger in my face. Karen, is that a threat? Are you threatening a customer? This is unacceptable. I'll have your job. At this point, Karen comes out and places my tea on the counter. I don't know if he's been listening to the conversation or not. He just calls my order number. Immediately, the woman grabs the tea and takes a sip, assuming it's hers. Before I can tell her, she spits it all over me. Karen, what is this? This is not my order, she pointed at Mitsu. Karen, you are incompetent. I want to speak to a manager about you and your jerk of a friend. Then she throws it away, still screeching. Her second mistake. It's one thing to get mad over my mistakes. It's another to accuse me of your own. Before I can even get a word out, Karen stops me. Karen, I'm the manager here. What seems to be the problem? Karen gets a triumphant smirk on her face. Karen, the rude employee here refused to take my order, and when I asked politely, he cussed me out and hit me. Then your other employee defended him while also calling me a witch. She lifted her sleeve, revealing a bruise on her upper arm, obviously from a previous injury or something, because I had not touched her at all. Karen looked at me with concern. Karen, T, you did this? I can't believe you. My mouth dropped. T, Karen, dude, you know I wouldn't. But he lifted his hand, stopping me. Karen, I need you to come with me. We need to discuss your status as an employee. Mitsu, don't leave either. Make her order, then come back too. He turns to look at Karen. Karen, I'm sorry, but after your order is made, could I ask you to wait so I can compensate you for your awful visit? Karen has the smuggest look on her face. Karen, of course. I'm happy management here is at least competent. Kieran leads me back into the manager's office. He closes the door, then turns to me with a look of exasperation. Kieran, all right, what happened? Immediately I realized he was on my side, and he was using his legendary theater skills to calm the lady down. I explain the situation, and he gets super pissed. Not only has this lady berated a customer, but also his employee, which just so happens to be his girlfriend. He begins to walk out, but I stop him. T. Call the cops. He looks at me, a questioning look on his face. I tell him my plan, and immediately walk out of the room with his approval. I walk back out and see Mitsu shaking either out of anger or anxiety. I don't know, while the lady is berating her. I walk to her and whisper something. She nods and walks back to the office. The Karen eyes me with triumph, and I glare at her. I check the screen to confirm something. Yep, I've got my evidence. I sit and wait behind the counter. Karen makes a couple remarks, berating me and trying to antagonize me, but I ignore her. Eventually, the police arrive. Kieran walks out, with Mitsu behind him. The Karen's eyes widen in excitement, as she realizes that her complaint is getting me in even more trouble than she originally anticipated. Kieran walks over to the officers, asks them to come with him back to the manager room, and tells the rest of us to wait in the front. Mitsu and I sit on the opposite side of the store to the lady. I checked with Mitsu. She's fine, just a bit angry now. Karen can barely contain her excitement of seeing how she got 2 delinquents fired and 1 arrested. A while passes, and the cops come out with Karen. They ask for our sides of the events. Karen begins first, painting herself as the victim while accusing me of verbally harassing her and assault, even going so far as to claim I touched her inappropriately. The cops come and ask our side of the story. Of course, we tell it together because we're clearly on the same side. The cops think for a minute, then turn around. Cop 1. Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest. She stands up, flabbergasted. Karen, I'm sorry. What? She points at me. He's the one who attacked me. Look at this bruise. She rolls up her sleeve again, exposing the bruise. The second officer, with an exasperated look on her face. Cop 2. Ma'am, you do realize there are security cameras in this building, right? Her face goes white, as she realizes her mistake. Kieran, Mitsu, and I share a triumphant smile. We all knew about the cameras, of course. They clearly recorded her yelling at us, the lack of me hitting her, and her taking my drink, as well as spitting on me. Kieran had shown them the footage when he called the cops back, at my request. When she protested that she never assaulted me, I told her it's assault when you intentionally spit a drink on someone. She protested, saying she thought it was her coffee. Kieran then shows the officer that the lady never finished her order, as Mitsu never entered. The cops arrested her and asked if I wanted to press charges. After the last time, a lot of people told me I should have pressed charges, so I did. She was charged with verbal harassment, assault, theft, and a couple things like disturbing the peace, etc. She was escorted off the property, screeching at us. We're awaiting the hearing, but I won't be posting about it. She likely won't make a scene considering, as she seemed to recognize it was a losing battle. I texted my manager later. She asked me for a description of the lady. She then told me that she would make sure that she never sets foot in my workplace either, as that could end up messy for the restaurant. She asked me that next time to act a bit more professionally, as that does reflect on the restaurant. However, she did agree that I did the right thing and asked if I got my tea. I said yes, and she asked how was it? I said it was great. It's my personal favorite. Green tea with mint and a pinch of justice. Story 4. I once spent quite a long time fixing a computer for a new client after their computer had crashed due to a complete failure of the old hard drive. Fortunately, the client had a basic file backup from about a year or two prior, which allowed us to recover most of their files. However, I had very little information to work with. I didn't know the original version of the operating system they were using, had no idea what applications they used, and didn't know which email client they preferred. Every question I asked was met with responses like, "I don't know," or "It didn't look like that before." Despite this, I remained patient, calm, and understanding. I even brought up images from the internet to see if any start menus or applications looked familiar to them. In the end, I installed the latest and most user-friendly versions of everything, set up their computer to look appealing and be easy to navigate, and ensured all their applications were accessible from the start menu. The situation became more frustrating when we spent an additional half-hour trying to recover a forgotten email password. The security question wasn't something they could recall. The partial recovery phone number listed wasn't theirs until it turned out to be their landline. Finally, they found the password written in their notebook, even though they had insisted, "That's not the one I use for my email," except it was. Eventually, I reached the point where I had invested significant time and effort. I had asked every conceivable question and managed to squeeze out a few answers. The computer was finally in perfect working order. However, over the next couple of days, I received multiple calls from the client. They asked where certain obscure applications had gone, why I hadn't installed a suspicious cleanup utility they had purchased, and why their email contacts were deleted. They were actually referring to autofill, which was understandably empty. They also inquired about their browser passwords. I went back to their location only to be met with a lecture. According to them, my work was not good enough. They claimed they had been invoiced a significant amount for the computer repair and that the work didn't meet their expectations. They just wanted the computer restored to exactly how it was before the crash. Looking back, I realized I had severely undercharged for my time, billing them for just 2 hours despite spending closer to 5 or 6 hours on the job. No matter how hard I tried, it seemed impossible to make them completely satisfied. Being younger and less experienced at the time, I had missed some clear warning signs. For instance, the client lived slightly outside my usual service area, where there were several technicians closer to them. The first phone call had come after regular working hours. They had been difficult and uncooperative from the start, seeming almost convinced that the job wouldn't be satisfactory. During small talk, they even complained about their plumber and mentioned how often they had to replace their house cleaners due to being let down. To top it all off, they still hadn't paid the invoice. The final straw came when they insisted, "Get it back the way it was." At this point, they left the room briefly, and I reached my limit. I removed the side panel of the computer case, disconnected the new hard drive, and reconnected the broken one that was still inside the case. Then, I grabbed my tool bag and met the client in the hallway. I told them, "It's all sorted. It's back exactly as it was before. Don't worry, I'll cancel the invoice so there's nothing to pay." Without waiting for a response, I left. I ignored their missed calls and eventually blocked their number. Although I briefly considered how I might respond to any email or online review, I never heard from them again. I like to think they eventually found someone less patient, significantly more expensive, and ultimately less effective than I was. Story 5. I, female, 19 years old, am the older sister to a well-meaning, but somewhat naive kid male, 16 years old, who we'll call Jake for the sake of this story. Today, Jake was supposed to attend a party at a friend's house. It might have been a birthday celebration, but I'm not entirely sure. The plan was for him to stay overnight. As you might expect, teenagers can sometimes make questionable decisions, and many at the party were drinking, including Jake's friend who was hosting. Apparently, the birthday boy drank so much that he passed out, but that's not the main issue here. The situation escalated when one of the attendees' mothers came to pick up her child. This mother, who we'll call Karen for this story, created quite a spectacle. Karen arrived around 3:30 am to pick up her child and noticed Jake and his friends still at the house. This was well past our curfew, which will be relevant later. Karen started confronting the group, and the following conversation ensued, translated from Spanish and pieced together from my frantic, exhausted little brother. Karen, "What are you kids still doing here? It's late." Jake, "Oh, hi Auntie Karen, we're all supposed to sleep over." Karen, "Well, it's late. You kids should head home." Friend 1, "Auntie, we can't. We're supposed to stay here. Our parents are asleep." Friend 2, "Yeah, my mom would probably get upset." Karen, "Well, I see the birthday boy is asleep. You can't stay over if he's asleep. You kids have to go home." Jake, "It's fine, Auntie. We all have permission to be here." Karen, "No, I'm the adult here, and you have to listen to me. I won't leave until all of you leave. Did I make myself clear? Jake, yes, Auntie. As a result, my underage brother and his friends were effectively kicked out of their friend's house by a determined Karen who believed she had the authority to do so. The group began making arrangements to leave. Jake wasn't overly concerned despite not having house keys at the time. He knew my dad is a bit of an insomniac and is usually awake around this time. My dad also trusts Jake enough to let him use the car, so he planned to drive home. As Jake was getting into the car, he suddenly heard Karen's voice again. Karen, young man, what do you think you're doing? Jake, hey Auntie, I'm driving home. Karen, you can't do that. All of you are obviously drunk, and you can't drive. I'm the adult here, and you have to listen to me. For the record, my brother was completely sober. While some of his friends might not have been, Jake certainly was. Regardless, he decided it wasn't worth continuing the argument and arranged for a ride with one of his friends who had also been kicked out. A similar conversation occurred, with Karen accusing his friend of being drunk and insisting they couldn't drive. Somehow, Jake managed to get home safely. He didn't share many details because he was still flustered, but I assume he got a ride since walking home at that hour in our city is incredibly unsafe, even for short distances. When he arrived, Jake manually opened the front gate, which is broken and cannot be locked. However, he found that the front door was locked, and the alarm system was activated. At this point, he realized that my dad had likely fallen asleep, unusual for him, but understandable since he had just returned from a Christmas party and was probably exhausted. Jake tried calling my mom, who is usually a light sleeper, but she didn't pick up. He then tried my dad, who also didn't answer. With his phone battery running low and no other options, Jake decided to call me. Jake, Ash, are you awake? Me, yeah, what's going on? Jake, I need you to open the door. It's locked. Me thinking he had the car and not understanding the situation. Oh yeah, the gate is broken. Remember, you have to open it manually. Wait, why are you coming home so late? Dad's going to be upset. Jake, no, Ash, you don't understand. It's locked. Just open the door, please. I'll explain in a second. Me still confused. Wait, we can lock the gate. How is that possible? Jake, no, Ash, the gate isn't locked. That's not the issue. The front door is locked, and I don't have keys. The alarm system is on. Can you please disable it so I can come inside? Me, okay? But if Mom or Dad hears and gets mad, that's on you. I went downstairs, still perplexed because Jake had never come home this late before. Our curfew is usually no later than 2:30 am. And this was almost 4 and my dad, being a light sleeper, usually waits for us to get home. So the entire situation felt bizarre. That was until Jake explained what had happened. Honestly, I'm exhausted by situations like this. I've dealt with similar incidents myself. I'll update if anything noteworthy happens tomorrow. But for now, I desperately need sleep. Good night, everyone. Story 6. Last night, I experienced a short but satisfying moment of petty revenge. I was out running errands and found myself at a traffic light, waiting to turn left. Behind me, there was another vehicle also waiting to turn left. As I waited for the oncoming traffic to clear, the light turned yellow, and the driver behind me flashed their high beams several times. I couldn't proceed safely yet because another vehicle on the opposite side was halfway through a right turn. I've never been a fan of impatient drivers, and this encounter reinforced my feelings. Once I finally turned left, we entered a residential area with several three-way stop signs. This is where my petty revenge began. Normally, at stop signs, I do a rolling stop, slowing down enough to ensure safety, but not coming to a complete halt. However, at the first stop sign, I decided to make a full and proper stop. I waited for about a second before continuing. By the second stop sign, the impatient driver behind me was clearly annoyed and flashed their high beams again. I couldn't help but smirk as I continued to obey the law and follow the driving school rule of making complete stops. At this point, the driver behind me started leaving a noticeable gap between our vehicles, likely to avoid having to stop so often. When we approached the third stop sign, I saw another vehicle coming from the opposite direction. Instead of my usual 1-second pause, I waited for about 3 to 4 seconds, pretending to gauge whether the other vehicle would proceed straight or turn. This prolonged pause seemed to irk the impatient driver further. By the time we reached the fourth stop sign, I turned left into a commercial plaza, while the impatient driver continued straight. When I parked, I couldn't help but smile. Normally, I'm not a petty person, but I have very little tolerance for impatient drivers. This small moment of satisfaction was worth it.